Transportation and Environment Committee to order. And before we begin, I want to remind committee members and members of the public, whether you are online or in person, although there doesn't appear to be anybody in person, to follow our code of conduct at meetings. This includes commenting on specific agenda items only and addressing the full body, not individual members or staff. All members of the committee, staff, and the public are also expected to refrain from abusive language, and failure to comply with this code of conduct will result in removal from this meeting. We will now come to order. If the secretary can call the roll, please.
Foley.
Here.
Perales.
Here.
Esparza.
Here.
Cohen.
Here.
And Davis.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, we will move on to item B, review of the work plan. We have a recommended deferral for one item. Are there any members of the public who want to speak on that? I don't see anyone.
No. Move to defer.
Second.
Thank you. Can we have the roll, please?
Foley.
Aye.
Perales.
Yes.
Esparza.
Yes.
Cohen.
Aye.
And Davis.
Yes. Thank you. We will defer that item to December. And now we're moving on to the consent calendar. There is one item on the consent calendar. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on that item?
Caller 1324.
Yes, Paul Soto from the Horseshoe. Good afternoon, council members. I would like to draw your attention. There needs absolutely to be discussion about this. You don't go to the planning commission meetings. I do. I literally go to every single meeting that this city conducts and the county, every single one. So you're operating from a position of ignorance. I'm operating from a position of knowledge because you weren't at the meeting, I was. So at the planning commission meeting, what gets discussed when these developers talk about these mitigation issues with respect to CEQA is they're saying specifically that people are going to catch cancer and that is an unavoidable consequence. They used another word, I can't remember what it was, but what they're saying is that people are going to catch cancer. And you do not want to get on the record on that issue. That's why this is going through consent. Okay? I know that's why it's going through consent. None of you want your voices or your opinions or your perspectives on the record with respect to these mitigation. Why? Because it can be, you can get nailed for it. You can still get sued once you're out of office. Because while you were in office, you had the responsibility to address these mitigation issues, which means that 15 years from now, most of the workers there, and most of them are going to be immigrants, they're going to catch cancer. And it's specifically, explicitly stated that it is unavoidable that people will. And these are your people, the ones that you guys say that you are trying to protect. And what you're actually doing is putting them in harm's way for cancer-causing agents because of what the developers are going to be doing to the land. That's why this is going through consent. I mean, you guys are just like shameless. I mean, just complete sinvergüenzas. Complete. That's all I got to say to you.
Blair Beekman.
Hi, Blair Beekman here. Thanks for the meeting today. I just wanted to thank you that Council President Davis very brightly and sprightly was able to ask for public comment on these items. And it's nice that for consent calendar and work plan deferral items for yourselves as council people to know how to ask for public comment at this time. Thank you that you have, and good luck in a good meeting today. Thank you.
All right, are there any members of the committee who would like to speak to the consent calendar?
Move approval.
Second.
Thank you. Can the clerk call the roll, please?
Foley.
Aye.
Perales.
Yes.
Esparza.
Yes.
Cohen.
Aye.
And Davis.
Yes. Thank you. All right, moving on to reports to committee, item D1, San Jose Clean Energy Cost of Service Study Summary Report. Lori, take it away.
Thank you, Lori Mitchell, Director of Community Energy, and very pleased today to be joined by Zach Strike, who is our Assistant Director. So this item is our cost of service study. Here we go. Just wait one. Okay. Okay, whoops. Okay, sorry for that. So today we're going to cover a number of items. First, just as a reminder, what our strategic plan framework recommended last year. Then we'll talk a little bit about our financial status, and then we'll get into the cost of service study. We'll cover the process as well as the results, and then our recommended rate strategy for this year. So just as a reminder, last year we did commission Deloitte to complete a strategic plan framework for the years 2023 through 2025. And they came up with a number of operational recommendations that we should implement. And just as a couple of them as a reminder, one of the things that they recommended is adopting a cost of service model in setting our rates. And then they also recommended that we build our reserves to 180 days worth of operating expenses to strengthen our financial position. And just as a reminder, our operating expenses are about $1 million a day, so 180 days is about $180 million. So just as a reminder, you saw this in the annual report, but our financial position has improved so that we ended 21-22 with 80 million just over in unrestricted fund balance, and we are projecting this year to build that to 170 million. Couple reasons for that improved financial position is number one, the rate adjustments that were enacted last year. But I would say the main driving factor is lower PCIA charges, which we'll talk about in detail later on in this presentation. So just as a reminder, in the past, we have always set our rates based on the IOU rates, or in our case, PG&E's rates. And so they have been a percentage above or below, but they've always been fixed to those rates. And so there was a few reasons that we recommended this in our startup. First of all, it's what most CCAs do. It allows them to start up very quickly because they don't have to do a cost of service study. It's also very easy for customers to understand the competitive position, and it easily allows us to establish customer confidence. But it does have its challenges. One of the most noteworthy is as those rates rise and fall, so do our rates. And we have seen a lot of volatility, particularly in the PCIA, and so that has limited our ability in the past to fully recover our costs, and it's also limited our ability to build reserves. So we did embark on a cost of service study earlier this year. This is a very industry accepted framework for utility rate setting. There's a couple components to it. The first step is really determining our annual revenue requirement. So we took a look at all of our costs and projected revenues for the next 3 years and came up with our annual revenue requirement. We also looked at what type of reserves do we want to build over that time frame as well. Then the next step was really cost allocation. So assigning those costs to different types of customers, whether they be residential or commercial or even street lighting. Each of those customers has a different cost framework associated with it. And then the final step is to design the rates and bring those forward for council consideration. So in terms of the revenue requirement, we did look at a forecast of our revenues and expenses over the next 3 years to come up with that data to supply the consultant. really important to note that our power supply costs, and most of our costs are that power supply. It's over 75% of our operating expenses. So we did do a couple of scenarios for fluctuations in those market costs and our total power supply costs to see how that would impact our revenue requirement. And you'll see that later on in the presentation. So in terms of the cost of service process, you can see this graphic is just another way to show it. So that first step, again, developing all of our revenue requirements. The second step is functionalizing those costs. So for us, it's really production or generation costs or power supply costs, another way to say it. And then we have a number of operating and administrative expenses. You can think of customer service, meter billing, reading, all of that is in that category. And of course, we do not have transmission and distribution. Those are provided by other providers. And then those costs are allocated to different types of customers. So you can see the examples here, residential, different types of commercial customers, as well as lighting. But we know the environment that we operate in isn't a standard utility operating environment and that we are in a competitive market. So in addition to doing the cost of service study and looking at what our projected costs are and then coming up with rates by customer class, it's really important for us also to take a look at where PG&E's projected rates going and how do our recommended rates compare to that. So that's something that we will show you as well in the coming slides here. So in summary, just a couple of benefits that we see in moving to cost of service rates. Number one is just more local control. So we can set our rates to achieve our financial and our clean energy goals. It also improves fairness. So rates are designed to recover the cost of the customers we serve among those different customer classes, residential, commercial, et cetera. It can also somewhat improve our competitiveness, although this slices both ways. Now that we are recommending that we are not pegged to PG&E, it's not as easy for the residential customer, commercial customer to understand our rates in relation to that, but it does allow us to set rates that are more stable and competitive over the long term. And it improves that predictability for our customers in understanding more consistent and transparent rates. And then finally, in terms of simplicity, there's some benefits there. One drawback is, again, we are not going to be a percentage of the PG&E rate, but it does allow us to create more simpler rate class structures. So PG&E's rates have many different types of residential customers and commercial customers, and this process does allow us to simplify that somewhat. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Zach Strike, who will talk through the results of the cost of service study.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Zach Strike, Assistant Director for the Community Energy Department. So Lori described the way that the process for calculating the revenue requirement for a given year. You can see here in the table that our power supply costs are by far the largest number, and we are reflecting uncertainty there in several cases because that's how the world is. So even though we've already locked up a number of our contracts for next year, not everything, and things change and regulatory requirements change, and so that's what you see there. That said, we do expect to be to finish between the expected and better cases. You'll see also that we have explicitly a line item as a cost to cover as a contribution to reserve. So we asked the consultants to include in the modeling getting us to 180 days of operating expenses no later than 2 years later, so the end of calendar year 2024. I'll talk more about that in just a moment. So as a reminder, as Lori talked about, we are in a competitive environment, and the customers, our customers pay hour costs as well as the PCIA. And a good way to think about it is shown on the slide here, is that the PCIA, which stands for Power Charge Indifference Adjustment, is really PG&E's stranded above market costs. So they retain a portfolio of generation assets themselves and contracts that they've made, long-term contracts with other generators. So those costs, those assets and contracts also have value. So the difference between those costs and the value is what we're calling stranded costs here. And those are shared by our customers in a monthly charge per month on a per kilowatt hour basis. What is really, it varies year to year though, because market prices change, and that's really the portfolio, what dictates the portfolio value. And there's a very defined process through the California Public Utility Commission, but it's annual. And so there's this annual true up. And so this real emphasis on short-term market conditions, and results in some significant market swings that we'll show on a chart in just a moment. So it's very hard for staff to predict and plan, where we've made great strides over the last 3 years to predict better, and we're in a much better position than we were, but it's still quite challenging, and there's tremendous volatility. A quick graphic here to show how the relationship between our rates and the PCIA and what customers pay. So we use the term customers pay generation charges, and that's the sum of our rates and the PCIA. And so you can see when the PCIA changes, if you're holding something constant, then our rates would need to change if we were not going to change the rates. So from a customer perspective, this is how they experience it. Alternatively, which is what it looks like to be the case this year, the PCIA could go down, our rates could go up, and the customer could still not pay any more or even pay less. So we need to think, in summary, that second sentence there, that we need to consider the PCIA in our rate setting and the total bill impact to customers. So this is a chart we show at least once a year. For a long time, it was a very steep rise in the PCIA change over time. And that percentage number at the top of each bar, that is relative to the first year, so relative to 2013, when this concept first got going. You can see that in 2022, there was a big step down. And then the latest forecast, and this is per PG&E's own submission, that PCIA for our customers would be actually negative. For now, as we think about customer bill impact, it's not clear that that's going to sail all the way through, and there's another month and a half before a final decision at the CPUC. So in our thinking about the customer impact, we're calling the PCIA 0. If it turns out to be negative, that would be additional benefit to our customers. And just for ballpark thinking, what does it all mean? Every half a cent per kilowatt hour, or $5 per megawatt hour, is about 18 million in revenues for San Jose Clean Energy, up or down. So the top number here, the top line, that's the revenue requirement that we talked about a few slides ago. Those are those same numbers there. And just to help the committee think about, what does this mean if we kept rates the same as last year? That would allow for an additional contribution to operating reserves, in addition to that which we are already baking into the revenue requirement. So that the total potential contribution to reserves at current rates, were we to keep current rates the same, would be between 80 million and 127 million over calendar year 2023. So we will bring, as we always do, a recommendation for rate setting for next calendar year to council next month. But to give a preview, our recommendation is to follow the guidance and the recommendations that we heard from Deloitte in their report at the end of last year, and to continue to build and use this opportunity this year, these very low PCIA, to continue to build and put most of that margin towards growing reserves in calendar year 2023 to hopefully 180 days of operating expenses. And so we think we can do that and move the pricing relative to PG&E of our default product, which more than 90% of our customer load is on, from 8% above PG&E, moving that to slightly below PG&E. And that would also result in an absolute lower monthly generation charges to our customers as well. And there will be much more on that when we return to council in December. But what that would look like is here. So these are ending calendar year 2023 unrestricted cash balances. And as described there at the top, that is based on where we finish calendar year 2022, contribution from operations in 2023, and includes paying back the $60 million in commercial paper loan. And so you can see helpfully, by coincidence, our operating expenses are approximately $1 million a day. And so the number of dollars in millions is the number of days of operating expenses. So we are hoping that the expected case, and that would be with a little room for error, the 180-day target. And the final slide is just showing that on a fiscal year basis for fiscal year 2022-23, and then the following. As discussed, there's a lot of uncertainty in the PCIA every year, as well as PG&E rates, and we want to take those into account or recommend that council do so. And so 2024 is somewhat more speculative, but anyway, for reference here. And again, it's the same assumptions about the ending balance from the year before, and so on. And in all cases, commercial paper has been paid off. So as I said, we'll continue to evaluate this, as well as monitoring what's going on at the PUC regarding the PCIA proceeding and PG&E generation rates and market conditions, and we'll return to council for consideration for rates and power mix December 6th. And that's it. Be happy to take any questions now.
Thank you. We'll go to the public first.
Blair Beekman. Blair Beekman. Caller 1324.
Yes, Paul Soto from the Horseshoe. Yes, Paul Soto from the Horseshoe. Thank you for the report, but I'm thinking the average citizen, which these are public meetings, and this is the purpose of the meeting is to inform just a regular average citizen about city business and what's going on. And I'm afraid that a lot of the language that's being used in these meetings is very esoteric. And you really have to have a background and kind of like be versed in a lot of information prior so that you can really understand what's being said. I mean, I've attended these meetings. This is my 5th year of advocacy. And this was very confusing to me because the word customer was used interchangeably. You used the word customer. I wasn't sure if you were talking about the city itself as an entity, or if you were talking about a person, the customer, the regular average citizen that's paying for PG&E in his house. So that was very, very confusing because you were using the same word interchangeably, but you meant two different things using the same word. Thirdly, is that we're going to be, as we start moving to electricity, and the deadline for creating all electric vehicles is 2035, you're going to have to start investing in a culture of electricity, for lack of a better term. In doing so, it's going to create this disparity. And that disparity is going to continue to be widened. And we're going to say, oh, well, this drew out all the racial equity disparities. We already know that. So what my question is to this particular report, why is there not a cost analysis with respect to racial equity? How come we are not using a racial equity lens in order to determine how the different districts are going to experience these costs? Because the districts are going to experience them very, very differently. And so that cost analysis with respect to racial equity needs to be placed in this report.
Blair Beekman.
Hi, Blair Beekman here. Thanks for seeing my hand. I just wanted to quickly offer thanks for bringing community energy items to the committee council meetings. I think as this memo and the presentation, it wasn't so much spoken as a presentation, but the memo did speak of ideas, practices that you can actually be doing in the next few years. That includes solar. And I wanted to comment that there's new things going around to limit the future of solar and take away its good practices of funding that it can have for local people and just everyday residents. And it's sad that that's happening. I can understand how it's happening. I wish as it was happening, it wouldn't be so brutal and cutthroat and strong. And we can take a softer approach to answer these solar questions in the future to allow more solar for more individuals. I think that's a really important goal. And good luck how we do make those efforts. And I don't want to lose that. And people are doing it in such a way to really hurt it. And that we should be doing things that note that we have to make some changes, I suppose, but from that to not hurt residential solar use and how more and more people can have rooftop solar. And I think that's a great concept. And it's more important than the solar farm issues, I think, and it's a real sustainable idea. Good luck how we can work on those things. Thank you.
Back to the committee.
Thank you. We'll go to my colleagues. Councilmember Cohen.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. It's good news. I'm glad to see we're actually going to be able to reduce rates for customers this year. I just have some questions about long-term planning first. You said that PCIA, we're assuming 0 and that it could be negative next year. When do we learn what PCIA will be?
So there's a final proceeding that typically happens in December, and then, depending on stakeholder comment, typically rates are implemented in January, but certainly in the past, we've seen things get delayed till March or later in the spring, so somewhat hard to know until a little bit later in the year.
So PG&E's rates will adjust at that point once they have the PCIA set?
Right.
So, but we do our adjustment once a year, so that means next year we would take into account, or do we have the opportunity to adjust once we know the real PCIA?
Yeah, so typically we have come every December in advance of that PG&E rate change, and the reason for that is our rates have been pegged to PG&E, and so we're trying to set our competitive position. That's been challenging for the obvious reasons because it's not a done deal on what PG&E's rates will be. So we're going to continue to bring this forward to council, but in terms of long-term planning, what we hope to do by going to cost of service rates is then actually move to taking rate recommendations in the spring with a budget process so that we can align with the fiscal year process, which is a little better for the city. But the other benefit of that is PG&E's rates will be known. So that's a benefit of going to cost of service.
So that means this coming year we might see another change coming sooner than the typical 12-month period during this year's budget cycle, or maybe you're going to wait a year before making that change.
Yeah, we haven't made that decision yet. I think a couple of things is we'll make this recommendation in December to set rates, and then we need to monitor revenues and see what happens, and also monitor the outcome of PG&Es to determine whether or not we'll bring forward another recommendation in June.
Okay, good. We've talked about the reserves before. The goal is to have 180-day reserves, about 180 million. If we get what's expected, or we may even do better than that, we could end up with reserves well over 180 already this year. And I know we've talked before about once we get to that point, using those reserves for subsidies and other incentives for customers to do more energy efficiency and help pay for energy efficiency projects around the city. Now that we're close to that point, are we beginning to map out what we might do as a program?
Yeah, it's an exciting position to be in. So if you recall, we've actually, for the last 3 years since our startup, we've had a programs roadmap that comes to this committee, typically in the spring. And to date, our programs have mostly been funded by external funding sources, mostly CPUC funds or other funding sources. But in that programs roadmap, it does identify the program areas that we would focus on once there are additional revenues to spend on those types of programs. So we envision this spring bringing that forward to T&E again, to getting your input. And we do envision it being a much more robust conversation because there are a lot of policy decisions to be made on, both offering further rate discounts or additional programs. And I expect, there'll be recommendations for both.
And you answered my next question, so that's good. So we would do some kind of mix of potential further discounts for customers in addition to beginning to implement things off the roadmap. There's no triggers that automatically do things off the roadmap. They would have to come back and be approved by council at that time?
Right. The roadmap is approved by the T&E committee, and then any program expenditures would have to be approved by the full council.
Okay, I think that's it for my questions. Thank you so much for the report, and I always like reports with good news.
Any of my other colleagues online have any comments or questions?
I'll move approval of the report.
Second.
Thank you. I don't see any hands going up. I just want to make sure, it is good news that the PCIA may be going away. I hope it stays away. But we're not going to fund programs until we have that reserve at the 180-day level. Is that right, Lori?
Yeah, so we have recommended some funding of programs. So next week we are bringing forward an EV pilot with a very limited amount of spending. As you know, we've also recommended some programs that leverage external funding,
Right.
Our energy efficiency programs, and the Cal EVIP program, which is largely funded through the Energy Commission. So we are going to stay the course with that very limited program funding until we build that reserve. But yes, very good news that we expect to have that reserve built by this time next year, December 2023. And so that does present opportunities for additional programs. But again, our very strong recommendation is to build the reserve first. And I would say that, yes, it's good news that the PCIA is negative next year. The reason for that is that power supply costs are high. The market value is high of PG&E's portfolio. I don't expect that to stay the case forever. Mm-hmm. Usually market prices will settle. Market prices are high right now for a number of reasons. One, the drought, the heat waves and extreme weather events that we've seen over the summer, and also the cold weather event in Texas. And then finally, the war in Ukraine is really pushing natural gas prices up. So I don't think those things, they may certainly continue into 2023 and 2024. And so we may see a low PCIA for a few years. But it's still something we have to stay very focused on and also continue to focus at the commission and in the legislature for a longer term solution.
Yeah, has there been any developments on the CPUC setting a timeline for a sunset of the PCIA? Because I think we know from your work that these contracts aren't evergreen, right? They don't last forever. There's a timeline on these contracts, and there's some point where I would hope the CPUC would say to PG&E, you are now in a competitive environment. You should have been taking this competition into account in your contracts since whatever 2012, 2015, whatever. Is there any indication that there's going to be a laydown of the law or that the legislature has any appetite for that?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's a very common sense argument, and we share it. And I think we need to continue continue to make it. Absolutely, very supportive of that. And I think there are some areas where we'll see that, and then there's some areas where we'll continue to have challenges. So let's take it, where the good news is where they are contracts, solar contracts, that are those early, when they do fall off, those should roll out of the PCIA. And so that's good news. And the more challenging side of it is PG&E's own generation assets. And so unfortunately on the utility-owned generation assets, those can go on in perpetuity. So they continue to make investments in that. And, to the extent that those generation assets are not operating within the market, we could still continue to see issues in the PCIA. So that is something we're going to continue to need to advocate on, that, they shouldn't be making above market investments in those types of generation supplies and then counting on recovering that in the PCIA. That doesn't make a lot of sense. But we're going to need to continue to build coalitions and work both at the CPUC and the legislature on that issue.
And that our ratepayers don't have to pay twice for
Right.
resource adequacy, for example.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. I don't see any other hands up. So can we have the roll?
Foley,
Aye.
Perez,
Yes.
Esparza,
Yes.
Cohen,
Aye.
and Davis.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to item D2, the City Initiatives Roadmap Vision Zero Traffic Safety Status Report. And I think John's got a whole host of people coming down for the box.
While everybody's coming down, John Risto, Director of Transportation, and we're going to be presenting Vision Zero Task Force and its report. And with me here today is Lily Limsa, my Deputy Director in charge of Traffic Safety and Operations, Lamb Cruz Division Manager, Jesse Mintz-Roth, Program Manager for Vision Zero, and Sergeant Gates from the San Jose Police Department. So I'm going to we'll get going right away with the presentation. I think, Jesse,
Okay. Yes, I think you can all hear me. Great. Yes, I'm Jesse Mintz-Roth, and thank you for the introduction. And I guess I'll just jump in. So today we'll be speaking to you about 3 topics: the 2022 traffic collision data trends, the recent accomplishments and upcoming work, and project evaluation. The first one is 2022 traffic collision data trends. And as I begin this section, which is about traffic fatalities and data, I would like to acknowledge that these numbers in the graph are our fellow San Joseans, our neighbors, and our friends. So in the last 10 years, traffic fatalities have doubled from 29 in 2012 to 60 in 2015, 2019, and 2021. In the pandemic years, we've seen a lot of variability. 2020 was a low year, as was the first half of 2021. The second half of 2021 into 2022 have seen much higher fatalities than usual. The yellow line on the chart on the right shows a steeper slope than usual from January to April. This period included 2 double pedestrian fatalities, one at the intersection of Almaden Expressway and Foxworthy Avenue in January, and another on Ocala Avenue at Oakton Court in April. We are seeing similar findings from other cities and states. In national data, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, or NHTSA, reported a 7% increase in traffic fatalities in the first quarter of 2022 compared to the previous year, and a 20% increase from quarter 1 2020, reaching a 20-year high. California was up 6% in the first quarter of 2022 over the previous year. Oakland is seeing a 78% increase in Q1 2022 over 2021, and in San Jose, we're seeing a 66% increase. Cumulative injuries by month on the left show 2022 injuries are running on the mid to high side of recent years. Cumulative fatal and severe injuries on the right are running average to high from January to April and begins to taper between May and July, similar to our fatality trend. Looking at traffic fatality trends for 2022, we're trending to a record high for traffic fatalities, and more of them involve people hit while walking, now over 50% of the total. 59% occurred in darkness, many of them in the first few months of the year that started off 2022 higher than usual, and has also been the darkest time of the year. So since 2019, the city has been using changeable message signs on major roadways, particularly those designated as priority safety corridors, to alert drivers to slow down, and coordinating with the police department to do enforcement in this time of year, November to March, which just began. In 2022, we started working with PRNS and the housing department to distribute flashlights and reflective safety vests, which I have here. So this is some of our vests. And we also have these two types of flashlights, which have our new logo on them. And we're still confirming the numbers for this year, but so far we believe there to be 10 or 11 people experiencing homelessness among the traffic fatalities. Streets with posted speed limits of 35 miles or above represent 82% of the fatalities, and 32% of the fatalities have occurred on the roads that we've designated as priority safety corridors. With numbers changing and to ensure our action plan is evolving with the latest data, it's important for us to review the most recent 5-year data to make sure our action plan evolves with the data. DOT staff is working with our data dashboard consultant, Urban Logic, to update and likely expand our Vision Zero priority safety corridor network. The existing map of 17 streets, totaling 70 miles, was released in 2017 and is based on crashes and injuries that occurred in the 5-year period from 2011 to 2016. The 2022 update in progress will use data from the most recent 5-fold data years, 2017 to 2021. We anticipate presenting the updated map to T&E in spring 2023. The priority safety corridors are the streets on which the Vision Zero program focuses its street safety investments. Moving to the second area, recent accomplishments and upcoming work. 245 safety infrastructure projects were completed in fiscal year 2021-2022. On the next pages, we'll discuss the 2 corridor safety projects that were built in quick build materials, but we also want to call attention to the many smaller safety projects the DOT staff works on every year. One of the new project areas is sideshow reduction projects. These locations were selected in coordination with the police department. Pedestrian safety enhancements, traffic calming projects, traffic safety construction and retiming projects, and bike lane projects all have street safety benefits. The Story Road project is a 2-mile-long project from Knox Avenue to White Road, and shown here in these pictures, before and after. DOT built new pedestrian refuge areas along new high-visibility crosswalks that shorten the crossing distance and improve visibility of people crossing the street on foot. The project also includes curb extensions, 4 radar speed signs, 71 LED streetlight fixture upgrades, and edge-line striping that visually narrows the outer lane width. Hillside Avenue is a 2.2-mile-long project from Almaden Expressway to Ross Avenue. The project leveraged the pavement program together with the Fund for Clean Air grant from VTA to build in quick build materials. We removed 1 excess travel lane in each direction. We installed a quick build center median island to reduce vehicle conflict. We installed bike lanes with green pavement treatments and added bicycle detection to signals to add at major intersections. Improvements were made at 6 signalized intersections, including high visibility crosswalks, curb extensions, and high visibility yellow signal backplates, which you can see in the image on the right. For the upcoming fiscal year, 2022 to 2023, 213 safety projects are currently scheduled. 6 safety projects are on 5 priority safety corridors, which are Branham Lane, McKee Road, White Road, Saratoga Avenue, and Tully Road. 58 pedestrian safety and traffic calming projects are on the list, as well as 5 sideshow reduction projects, 109 traffic signal projects, and 35 bike network projects. Moving on to grant applications, DOT recently submitted multiple applications for 3 major grant opportunities. Staff applied for projects totaling $331 million for One Bay Area Grant, or OBAG funding, and anticipate receiving $59.5 million, of which $36.8 million is on 3 of the Vision Zero priority safety corridors, and $22.7 million is in non-Vision Zero corridor locations. We applied for $450,000 from the Federal Highway Administration Highway Safety Improvement Program, known as HSIP, the location at Ocala Avenue and Oakton Court. We applied for a $450,000 median, which I previously mentioned. It's one of the locations that had a double pedestrian fatality earlier this year. It's also located across the street from a school that has a school site with multiple schools in it, including the DCP Elm Rock Middle School and Ocala STEAM Academy. We also applied to a new grant, which is the U.S. Department of Transportation's new program called Safe Streets for All, the implementation grant program. This new grant is part of the new bipartisan infrastructure law grants. And for this location, we applied primarily for Center Road between Tully and Monterey, but also additionally the intersection of Almaden Expressway and Foxworthy Avenue, which is another of the locations that had a double pedestrian fatality this year. And our co-applicant on this grant was the County Department of Roads and Airports, which enabled us to apply for more money. This application includes also a big data subscription, which we could use to evaluate for all projects citywide before and after, and also seed money for a local chapter in the South Bay of Families for Safe Streets. We anticipate hearing the official results of all of these applications in early 2023. Moving on to the Vision Zero Strategic Communication and Outreach Plan, which includes these new slide templates and also this new logo that you'll see on our materials. We completed phase 1, which was developing a communication strategy. And in phase 2, which included identifying an issue for a big campaign to do safety messaging for behavior change, speeding reduction was selected as the subject for San Jose Vision Zero's first branded campaign. We did focus groups in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese, and they reviewed 4 ad design concepts. A key finding is that San Jose participants do not identify themselves as speeders, which makes it, why it's important to have a professional marketer come up with the message. And so they will be presenting the campaign strategy overview at the next Vision Zero Task Force meeting on November 30th. Looking at setting speed limits for safer streets, Assembly Bill 43 became effective on January 1, 2022, and it gives local agencies more flexibility in lowering the speed limit in business activity districts if it meets very specific criteria. The posted speed limit was lowered to 20 miles per hour for 6 business activity districts, which are Evergreen Village Square, portions of Almaden Avenue, Jackson Street, Post Street, Santa Clara Street, and Willow Street. We'll be working with a consultant to identify more streets that meet the bill's specific eligibility requirements in the coming year. As part of the new bill, engineering and traffic surveys may be extended to 14 years as opposed to the 10 years that they were previously able to live. This allows the police department to enforce with radars on corridors where no major changes have been made, but surveys were previously considered to have been expired. The last area is about project evaluation. With significant investments going on, we strive to do our best to evaluate projects. In August 2022, at the Vision Zero Task Force meeting, we presented before and after project evaluations. We intended to show if projects are meeting their goals. Typically, we'd like to use 1 year of after data, but we did some of these projects with less, particularly Center Road. We only had 6 months of after data because we were applying to a large grant. We wanted to know where we wanted to make potentially more improvements. So among the projects that we're discussing here, there's 3 different kinds of projects on this slide. Center Road is a quick build corridor, and it has a capital median the second project, which is McLaughlin, is a capital median project. And the third section, which is White Road, is intersections where we have installed flashing beacons. So just to talk about Center Road, it was the first major corridor safety project completed in quick build materials under the 2020 Vision Zero Action Plan. And true to the material strategy name, the project was quicker and cheaper to build than capital projects, which is a particularly good strategy match for a program with the goal to build safety improvements before more injuries occur. The Center Road evaluation focuses on the 3.1 mile corridor project built in quick build for about $365,000, completed in August 2021. That is based on a consultant-led grant-funded project, and that planning process was completed in 2020. The project area includes a $3.6 million grant-funded median, which is also completed in June 2021. The next projects are capital-only grant-funded projects, one in 2015 and 2016 and completed in 2020 and 2021. McLaughlin is a 2.6 mile, $5.3 million median, of which $2.5 million was grant-funded, completed in November 2020. White Road is a 2 intersection project where rectangular rapid flashing beacons were added to crosswalks, funded by a $1.2 million grant, completed in May 2021. So going to results, all injuries for all road users decreased in all of these projects. However, this slide is very focused on fatal and severe injuries, which we call KSI, and they are the focus of the Vision Zero initiative. So comparing 5 years before average, so an average of 5 years before, to in each of these cases, Center Road with 6 months of after data, White Road has 9 months of after data, and McLaughlin has 1 year of after data. We agree is confusing, but we'll update these when we have more data. In the after period for Center Road, there were 2 fatal and severe injuries, and we have already applied to capital grants to make these places safer. The intersection of Center and Umberger Road, we have applied to 1 grant to build a protected intersection there, and the intersection of Center Road and Keys, we've also applied to another grant to make that area safer. On McLaughlin Avenue, since the project was completed, there have been 2 fatalities north of the intersection at Tully Road, and 2 severe injuries at the intersection of Glenfinnian, which is a T intersection where the new median was built in the north leg. In these locations, we need to go back and look to see what more we can do. Staff continues to evaluate projects to determine if additional enhancements are warranted. On White Road, we're looking at the rectangular flashing beacons, and we see that they have worked so far at those intersections. This practice of evaluating the projects is the standard operating procedure that we will be doing going forward on corridor projects. And now we'll move to Q&A.
Thank you. We'll go to the public first.
Caller 1324.
Yes, Paul Soto from the Horseshoe. The one thing that is very odious about these reports is the monetization of the killings of my fellow citizens of the city. It's like you get more grant money the more murders that are committed. I mean, these are dollar signs. You see, and it's sickening to think that that person's life, which the majority of the population that's being slaughtered on our streets, are people that are experiencing being unhoused. And probably, which I would say is a very accurate assessment, generational poverty. Okay, and you're talking very cavalier about monetizing their deaths, because if they're killed, then you get $3 million grant to build a something that should have been there in the first place to prevent the death. That's number one. Number two is that $15 million has already been paid out through Vision Zero, and the body count continually increases. So it's a failed proposition to continue to finance Vision Zero. It's a failure. Number three is that, and this is a fact, that 30% of the fatalities are experienced on 3% of the landmass in San Jose. This is a fact. What's being done about that? We don't need any more data, okay? We don't need a computer to tell us what we already know. Maybe you do, but we don't. And so I'd like something to be said with regard to the issues that I've just raised. And I'm like, once again, I'm sick of the monetization of the poverty that's being experienced in this city, because the people that are being slaughtered are homeless, and their life wasn't worth housing when they were alive, but they're worth millions dead. Thank you.
Blair Beekman.
Hi, Blair Beekman here. Thanks for this item. I guess first off, a reminder that Vision Zero in this country was based on European designs and designs of like Guadalajara, Mexico. You know, that's kind of like what Viva San Jose is about each year. That's, you know, it's concepts of community harmony, not law enforcement technology. That's obviously the American concepts of these things. Good luck how we can work towards a more organic, harmonious concept of Vision Zero. With that said, a reminder that, you know, the statistics that we're using about KSI and such, we made a commitment to good racial equity ideas a few years ago in the future of KSI statistics, and to start counting homeless people into those KSI statistics. And we need to have those open conversations as you're talking about these items, about that subject. I know there's a pretty intense battle going on back and forth about how to get funding and how to read into statistics of the past few years. We really have to be honest and truthful, you know, that we are now including homeless people into KSI statistics when we didn't in the past. And that's important. I know Gail Osmer, she's got some ideas and really wants to work on, you know, how do we address, you know, homeless deaths out of these vision traffic issues. So good luck in working on these things. And with 30 seconds left, you know, I can't say enough that we have to practice openness and accountability in all the new technology that's going to be used for these projects. It can be done. It shouldn't be fearful. And obviously, you know, the ALPR issue went really badly back in October. We have to be really honest in our future how to address those sort of concepts with ourselves. Accountability is so important at this time. Good luck with that. Thanks.
Back to the committee.
Thank you. I will call on Councilmember Perales, who has his hand up and I believe is still the chair of the Vision Zero Task Force.
We did vote at the council to do a swap of myself and who was vice chair, Pam Foley. So at the next Vision Zero meeting, I will be the vice. I believe I'll be the vice chair and she'll be the chair. But as the outgoing chair of Vision Zero, I will respond to some of the comments. And then I did want to just make a couple comments of my own. So first off, Vision Zero is an aspirational goal. For those that aren't totally aware, it's something that a number of cities across the country have adopted. And it absolutely is an aspirational goal. It's one that we hope to be able to achieve. I know I certainly do. It's why we have a task force. We're going in the absolute wrong direction. And it's a goal for our entire city to be able to drive these traffic-related fatalities down to zero. And I think it's a very worthy aspirational goal. And then secondly, in case it's not clear, we would much rather not have to apply for or receive any grant dollars for Vision Zero projects. We would much rather have these incidents not occur. This is not about monetizing death or fatalities, in case that's not clear, and for those that are listening. And just for myself, some of the comments, I will say that I'm really appreciative of the comprehensive list of projects. I think that's very helpful. We get a lot of questions at times from community members on, what is it that DOT is doing, and we get that amongst our districts. And I know that we look at some of the projects that we'll have just in our district alone, and it's not common where we'll have such a comprehensive list to go on. I think this list that you provided here is extremely helpful for all council members to be able to take back to their communities and show really how big the need is. It's easy to think about when you think about how big our city is, but when you see the comprehensive list here as it's detailed, the amount of work that DOT is doing is tremendous. And I just appreciate that list, the way that it was laid out in this report. Secondly, in regards to AB 43, I do think that it is not going to be as beneficial. I hope that our consultant can help us. But my request is that we engage in some lobbying efforts. We engage our Sacramento lobbyists and maybe try to see if there's an interest from cities across the state to do more. I know I have an interest to do more. I know my colleagues do. What we found is that tool is not going to be as useful for us as we had initially hoped. And we see the number of intersections and corridors where we're able to implement it right now, and it's not very significant. And so I would like to see if there's a way that we could initiate some lobbying efforts on AB 43, and I'll ask staff to respond to that after my final comment here. Lastly, as the outgoing chair of the Vision Zero Task Force, I did want to make a couple comments. I will make these at the last Vision Zero Task Force meeting that I'll attend, but I do believe that considering the direction we're going, we've had this task force. We engaged in this because we were going the wrong direction. Well, it's still getting worse, and this may be the worst year yet. I think that we absolutely need to double down and consider making this a much more longer term effort. It has been helpful. It's been helpful to stay on top of some of these things and helpful to look at these more collaboratively with partners across the county and across the city. And I think we should consider advancing it from a task force to something like what we do with our Smart Cities committee, and actually consider evolving it on its own, at least in the near term. I don't think we're going to be getting down to zero anytime soon. And quite frankly, we need to just turn this trajectory around. And I think that's going to require a little bit more effort and focus. And I appreciate the opportunity we've had over the last couple of years with the task force, but I do think that we'll need to beef that up in the year to come. And so that'll be my comments again in that final task force, just kind of leading up to it here. But I will ask staff to respond to the lobbying efforts, and then I will move to accept the update, the report. Thanks.
Second.
Jesse, do you have an update on Councilmember Peralez's question about AB 43 and the lobbying effort to really be able to expand that?
I don't know that I can directly comment on the lobbyists, on the lobbying effort, but one thing that I would say is there's a provision in AB 43 which is not yet enacted, which is referred to as safety corridors. So I believe Caltrans has until 2024 to define what safety corridors are, but cities will be able to designate up to 20% of their roadway as safety corridors. And once that happens, there's more ability to, I believe, lower speeds on those places. But in any case, we don't yet know what that is. We're waiting to find out what they are.
Rather than waiting to find out, are we involved in assisting with the rulemaking on that?
I believe the answer is yes, but do you have any more information
Lily?
than I?
Yes. Thank you, Councilmember Davis. Lily Limtow, Deputy Director of Traffic Operations and Safety. Yes, we are actively engaged in that conversation with Caltrans. In fact, we just had a meeting last week where Laura Wells represented DOT in identifying the characteristics of our streets in comparison to other city streets. And they are very different. And with Caltrans focused on certain regions of the state, they have very different perception of what a safe street would be. So it was important for us to convey how San Jose streets operate and how we are very different, very urbanized, roadways and in very different uses. Yes, we're actively engaged in that conversation.
Thank you. Councilmember Foley?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, and I want to thank and echo the words of my colleague, Councilmember Perales, for acknowledge his leadership on the Vision Zero Task Force, but also his concern about our growing numbers of pedestrian fatalities on our streets. And for those members of the public who believe that we're monetizing death and we think that that's okay, I want it to be stated very clearly that we don't think it's okay. We are pouring lots of funds into Vision Zero, but unfortunately, some of it may not be successful. So we need to keep evaluating it and keep working in efforts to make our streets safer for all of our pedestrians, be they bicyclists, be they housed, be they unhoused. Just in my district last week, there was a fatality of, we believe, an unhoused person on Cherry Road near Almaden Expressway. So it's a very serious thing. Every Vision Zero Task Force meeting, we start with actually reading the names of the individuals who have passed on our streets as pedestrians, and it's very, very sad for that to occur. The numbers are not acceptable at all. We need to do better. I think this report shows some of the things that we're doing, but we need to do better. I'd love to see us, it isn't just about throwing money at the situation, although that helps as far as the quick builds are concerned. And I look forward to the data on Hillsdale in particular, since that's the one in my district, but also in Center and other areas. The data that what we've done as far as the quick build is concerned is actually successful in achieving the goals that we have. But I have to say that people's driving behavior is really appalling. And while people listening to this meeting right now may not believe their driving is appalling, but I'm sure they're witnessing appalling behavior. I witnessed the other day, we have these candlesticks in the middle of Hillsdale Road that makes it almost impossible to cross over. You have to make a U-turn, a left turn, or I mean a right turn. You can't cross directly and then make a left turn. But in one particular case, I saw a gentleman drive through the candlesticks, knock them down so that he could make a left turn quicker than going up and making a U-turn at the light. And so our behavior, our driving behavior needs to be modified. And I look forward to our marketing people, our outreach people, figuring out what messaging we need to do to change behavior, because whatever we're doing now is not working. People are driving too fast. They're driving recklessly. They're not looking when they're making right turns. They're not looking at the bicyclists or the pedestrians who are crossing in their path. They're driving distracted. People are walking distracted. They're riding their bikes distracted. There's a lot of behavior modification that we need to be doing, whether we can actually do it or not. People need to be willing to listen to the message and be concerned about keeping themselves and each other safe. I have a husband who rides his bike to and from work every day, and I worry about him when he comes home in relation to the traffic and bad driving. So I would encourage everyone who's listening to this to really drive safely, and please be really careful out there, because we are tracking the unhoused, but it's members of the disabilities, it's senior citizens who have a harder time crossing the street. There's a lot of conditions on our streets that make driving easier, but make the fatalities easier also, and that's just appalling. We need to do better. We need to do 100% better, and that's what Vision Zero is all about. So I look forward to us convening and moving forward and coming up with ideas and trying things. We try things, they don't work. We keep trying more things that will work, and we learn from other cities. So I will leave it with that. Except that I really hope our lobbying efforts with AB 43 are successful. We need to do something to reduce the speed limits in our streets. And then we need to hire more police officers, which I know we're all focused on. We just need to get the individuals to apply, to go through the process, and then to become police officers, and particularly in our traffic enforcement unit. With that, I'll leave the discussion, but I really appreciate the presentation, and I look forward to the last Vision Zero meeting for Councilmember Perales, November 30th. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Esparza?
Thank you. So ditto on everything Councilmember Perales and Foley, what they said. I also really wanted to thank the DOT team for really working so diligently and putting a lot of thought into the different projects that we're moving forward, different strategies that we're trying out, because I do agree with Councilmember Foley. Like, we have to try many different things, and whatever doesn't work, we move on to the next strategy. And there have been a lot, and that list is really comprehensive. Great to see the different strategies that we're taking in different environments. That I think is necessary to look at it that way. And I also wanted to, and I'll leave it to the lobbying, because I can't even, I'm so disappointed that the bill didn't move forward, and why it didn't move forward. But I also wanted to just bring up one issue, is I still think we are undercounting the number of homeless individuals that have been have lost their lives or been severely injured as a result of these horrendous accidents. And so I also wanted to highlight the need for an interdepartmental effort. As far as I know, PD are the only ones that have gone into the creeks to do that outreach. And we also really need to look at where it just does not make sense to have encampments. If it's in the middle of a clover leaf, then we can't be shocked if folks are getting hit trying to cross an expressway every day. And so we really need to look at that differently. It's much more than DOT. We have to try multiple strategies where there are some areas that are just too unsafe to have encampments in that area. And then we need to do that outreach needed and bring those strategies into place so that folks can come inside and not live next to an expressway. And I'll stop there. But thank you. And thank you to Council Members Foley and Perales for their leadership on the Vision Zero Task Force.
Thank you, Councilmember Esparza. Councilmember Cohen?
Yeah, thank you. Mainly, I have one question, but mainly I want to thank everybody on the team for the work. I noticed 245 traffic improvements in that. I don't know if it was the last fiscal year. I guess that's what it was. That means one a day. That's a lot, and it's impressive work. And I know a lot of it is reactive because we, as council officers, or just you as a department, know where things are happening and know what needs to be upgraded. And I know that the work you're doing is making streets safer in general. And also want to thank the police department for the work that you're doing. Even though the traffic enforcement unit is short-staffed, I know that when we ask and say, here's a place where we should have some enforcement, there are teams that are going out and doing that, and it makes a difference when people have that visibility. So I want to thank you. The question I have, there's that, I thought that was a really interesting table on one of the slides. I don't have it in front of me to know which page it was, but the one that showed what percentage of fatal accidents were occurring in various situations, whether it was due to speeding or pedestrians or bikes or whatever it was. Do we have that broken down in that same manner for all accidents and not just the fatal ones? Because I was wondering if we can learn from that. Obviously the fatal accidents are important, but the sample size is small. And I often think we can learn more from the complete set of where accidents are occurring. And I'm not asking if we have it today. I'm asking more generally, do we have access to that data? And how do we use that data, that more holistic data, when we do look at where we're going to make traffic improvements?
We're going to try to get that slideshow back up. But in the meantime, I think we know which one that is. It was the percentage of just fatalities. So the question is, do we break it down?
I think they're putting it back up.
Yeah.
We don't have a slide that looks that way for all injuries. It would be possible to do one, just as the way that the data comes into us, we know the information about traffic fatalities faster. So if we were to do this for all injuries or other types of crashes in general, it would lag by about 3 months at least.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And again, I wasn't asking for it today,
Yes.
and I'm not asking. Even with a lag, I
Yeah.
wonder that if there's something can be learned, because there might be clusters of streets that are dangerous with accidents that occur regularly, but may not. And maybe it's true. Maybe those are lower speed thoroughfares. They're happening in ways that won't be necessarily lead to fatality, but they are areas that have more accidents in theory, and they may not have risen to the top on this list, but they may come by using other sets of data. And I was just wondering if
It's a great question. I'd say that in the work we've currently been doing to update the priority safety corridors, we have been really deep in the data, and so has our data consultant. So we do very likely have the underlying data to do that. We just haven't put together a slide that looks like this to explain it.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Perales?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to add one thing based on what Councilmember Foley had said in regards to the sort of the marketing that maybe we could do, and to tie that into her last comment in regards to TEU and beefing up our traffic enforcement. I just look back to when I was a young kid and a first time driver. I ended up with 3 tickets in 6 months and had my license suspended. Running a stop sign, speeding, right? And it really what got me was that, right, was the enforcement. And I'm not saying that that's what everybody needs, and you would hope that that's not what people need, but unfortunately, I think that's the best tool that we have. That's the best type of marketing we have, is our police department, our police officers, our traffic enforcement unit. I think if we were to get back to the numbers that we had, which would be nearly a quadrupling of the numbers today, when we had about 44 members in TEU, I think that's the kind of marketing that would make a difference. To say that we have beefed up our traffic enforcement unit and that we are taking Vision Zero serious, that we know that the number one cause is speed or excessive speed. That's the number one cause, and that we're taking it serious and we're going to go out there and we're going to enforce it. I think that would make a huge difference, and we could market that if we were to put that investment out there. And for what it's worth, to add some marketing to it, this former Vision Zero Task Force chair and about to be police officer again is excited to get out there and enforce some of those traffic laws. And so you can take that as some marketing, and hopefully it works. So thanks.
Thank you. We'll stay on that topic for the Sergeant Gates. How many traffic enforcement officers are out there now, and what's your sense? I know in Western Division, some patrol officers are writing tickets now. Is that happening in all the divisions? So to kind of help with the TEU.
Well, the first question is, we have 14 enforcement officers in the unit. As far as patrol officers writing tickets in every division, that is the expectation for them too. In their free patrol time when they're not answering calls for service, absolutely. Whether that's being done or not, I really can't say.
Okay. I think it would be helpful to have some of those numbers for the next Vision Zero meeting about how many tickets are being given, how many citations are being written for speeding in different parts of the city.
Okay. I don't know if with our current system, I don't know if we can break it down by division or by district. I can give you overall counts of tickets, no problem.
I think that would be helpful since they haven't, I don't think they've gotten that information before. I know it hasn't come here.
I can tell you
So
last month we wrote 653 speeding tickets.
that's great. It would be great to see some trends for that. That kind of goes along with the communications plan to reduce speeding. I think there needs to be an enforcement part of that. Unfortunately, our social fabric is not as strong as maybe it once was, and our sense of responsibility toward others is not as great as it should be. So whatever the communications plan is, I hope that it's being made personal, because I don't think appealing to people's better angels is really going to work right now, unfortunately. And I think that the possibility of getting a ticket has to be part of that message, and the ramping up of the enforcement has to be part of that as well. Again, I think we're just not in a place right now where people's sense of social responsibility is very high, and so the avoidance of a ticket is going to be more impactful, and the fact that we don't have a lot of enforcement right now, I think, is contributing to the problem. Again, that's just because of where we are right now culturally. I did have a question about if we could go back to that slide 6. I think that was the slide that mentioned the fatalities that were and were not in crosswalks, and I just wanted to the outside of crosswalks or in the roadway. Does that mean that they weren't in marked crosswalks, or that they weren't in at what we all consider, they weren't at a corner?
It's everything. It's, it could have been close to a marked crosswalk, or it could have been really far from one.
Okay, but not every, so when you say crosswalk, you mean a marked crosswalk?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I was clear on that, because I know that it's supposed to be safe to cross at any corner, right? At any intersection. And so if we're not assuming that in this, we're assuming that it has to be we're saying that it's a marked crosswalk.
Yes, I believe so, yes.
Okay. Thank you. And that's all just to get that stuff kind of straight in my head, that what we're talking about. I did want to ask also about the request for funding for a big data subscription. It was only mentioned once in the memo, and you mentioned it a little bit. What are the details of that? What would that look like?
Sure. So in order to do the data evaluations for any corridor project, you could do individual small contracts to get different types of data, or you could have a so-called big data subscription, which, to give you an example, there's several companies that take the data from moving cell phone signals and basically accumulate it and then sell it back to cities or other city-like entities, and create a map where we can look at the volume of all people traveling on different modes on every street in town over time, historical and current. So that type of data subscription would allow you to highlight any individual street and say that a project was built there for a year. And then you could basically look at all of the data that has happened since that year and all the data they have on file that happened before that year and compare them. So it's a rather expensive type of subscription that would be nice to bill to a grant, because it's money that we may not have around to subscribe to get that type of data.
And who would be doing the analysis on this? I mean, big data is I've worked with it a little bit. It's very hard to work with because it's so overwhelming. And you have to, it's pretty specialized. So who, do we have someone on staff who is capable of doing that, or is part of the grant having a consultant who would be working with the data to help us answer questions? How would that work?
Conceptually, this is for our staff to learn how to use it. But we don't necessarily have a specific vendor in mind, although I do know other cities that use this type of subscription. So I know that the platforms themselves have been developed to do this type of study and make it relatively intuitive, although I'm sure they can still be improved. So I agree that it's a lot of data and it's a challenge to learn new platforms. We definitely agree with that. I guess we'll have to see whether we get this grant, et cetera, and whether we'll be able to do this. But in the current idea, our own staff would probably learn how to do it, because that would be a more sustainable option than getting consultants to do the analyses for us.
Do we have data scientists or statisticians on staff?
We have one person in an adjacent group, and we also have one person in, actually one growing to maybe 2 people in my group who are doing a lot of data work. So I'm going to go with yes. You're going to go with no? Okay.
Councilmember Davis is teeing it up for us. And really,
Okay.
one of our proposal would be to gain a data scientist of that sort, but also to work with vendors to create dashboards that are easily understood and utilized in our evaluation process and not raw data.
Got it.
But thank you, Jesse.
Thank you. That's helpful. Just at a very basic level, if we already have people looking at data, going to slide 18. So I assume, and I feel like I have to preface this with saying, obviously having the raw numbers of deaths and severe injuries go up is a bad thing. I don't want to minimize that in any way, shape, or form. But what I do want to understand is if any of these interventions are successful, even if the raw number is going up, because if we know the number of people traveling by that mode has increased by more than the number of KSI has gone up. So if people feel safer, right, because of these interventions, they may be more likely to shift modes into a more environmentally friendly mode, such as bicycling or walking. And so we might have, in the short term, the raw numbers of KSI. Again, I don't want that, but I'm just saying it's a possibility going up because we have the overall rate of people shifting into that mode is going up. Are we able to answer that question?
That would be more easily answered in the big data subscription, because that, for example, the thing about the collected cell phone signals can tell how fast they're moving. So I don't know that in the current data that we have, for example, Center Road, that we'd be able to tell you whether there are more people walking there in the after period. But one of those products would be able to tell you that.
Okay. I would put that very high on the list because I understand wanting to continue to do more interventions in places where we see these red arrows, obviously, and you might think that where the green arrows are that we've done our job. But if we haven't gotten more people shifting into the modes, which is a different issue, but also part of our goals as a city, then we may not have completed the job in one place where we think that we have. That's it for me. I really appreciate all of this. You're probably not going to be surprised to hear that I'm really excited about the possibility of having big data and to be able to answer a little bit more complex questions, and even to get to the level of like the questions that Councilmember Cohen had, I think are really important for us to have a full picture, and maybe even might be when we're talking about just crashes that aren't leading to KSI, maybe issues that are leading indicators. If crashes are going up in one area, maybe we can head off KSIs in that area. So I think it would be beneficial for us to be looking more holistically at the data, and I really hope that we get that grant. Thank you. I think we are ready for the roll, and we also need people to be muting who are on Zoom. Thanks.
Foley,
Aye.
Peralez,
Yes.
Esparza, Cohen,
Aye.
and Davis.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will now move to open forum.
Blair Beekman.
Yes. Oh, shit. I'm sorry.
Blair Beekman.
Hi, you found me. Good, thank you. Hi, Blair Beekman here. Can you start the timer over, please? It's at 1:40. Thank you so much. Hi, Blair Beekman. Thanks a lot for the meeting today. Thanks a lot for the words. Oh, hold on. Thanks a lot for the words of Councilperson Esparza, who I felt did an incredible job to describe homeless issues with Vision Zero. I think that can really address the community harmony issues that we're trying to address, and really focus on a serious problem that homeless people are dying in pretty large numbers. Good luck how you can work on that. And I wanted to take this time to just overall thank the work of Gail Osmer, who really wants to work on these issues, and to apologize to both her and to Sean Cartwright, who I used a few words last week. I may not have quite been interpreting situations fully correctly, and I just wanted to apologize for that. It's my own intention to figure out whatever good practices we currently do in San Jose about notifications of homeless sweeps, that we can just take a look at how we're doing those good practices and update them if we need to a bit at this time, if it's necessary. Hopefully that's a better way to say it. So good luck on how we can work on these issues. It's my hope that in the future of the Ukraine area, I'm going to take a different approach with this, and just simply offer today that I hope that, health and human services and racial equity can really be ways to address peace for that area. And I think I'll just leave it at that today. And it's with that said that, we're pretty gung-ho and seriously focused on war in this country and law enforcement these days. With what you talked about today about Vision Zero, we have to be very careful to just totally go into more and more tech and more law enforcement. Let's be cautious and really think of community harmony and green sustainability as the initial ideas of Vision Zero. Thank you.
Daniela Castaneda.
Hi, my name is Daniela Castaneda. I am a resident of District 6 and also a community organizer with Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition. I really appreciate the update. As a community organizer, I'm working around making streets safer. It has been frustrating in what sometimes feels like lack of transparency, of not really knowing what's happening, especially knowing that we're at, I believe, 58 deaths this year, but since 2015, we're at more than 437 deaths of traffic fatalities. I do want to encourage to continue the transparency and seeing how we can measure and have very specific goals over the years, just because I think Councilmember Perales mentioned it. It's such a grand goal to have, and being able to measure that on a year-to-year basis, it will definitely help with the transparency and the accountability, ensuring that what we are doing is working. As someone else mentioned, I believe we've done all these improvements, but yet our numbers are still really, really high. I also want to encourage that in many of the plans that have been mentioned, they talk about how a lot of the things are out of the scope of what the Department of Transportation is able to do, that it's out of their wheelhouse. I think this is a really important place to see that when we're trying to solve problems, it's important to have a collaborative approach, and that it's not just one thing, but there's other things as well. So also recognize that Vision Zero is much bigger than just.
Caller 1324.
Yes, Paul Soto for the Horseshoe. I'd just like to note it for the record that there was 2 people that from the public that had directly addressed council members by name. Okay, so it's the hypocrisy, the bias and the prejudice in these meetings was just outlined right then and there. No one checked them. No one checked them at all. Okay, so you can get your rules and just toss them because they're a joke. They're a joke. They're the height of hypocrisy. That said, I am very, very proud to announce that the building that produced the first issue of Lowrider at 282 Willow Street is now a historical landmark. The church at 384 Willow Street, Sacred Heart Church, is now a historical landmark because of the work of Paul Soto from the Horseshoe. I am extremely proud of that. Lowrider Magazine is coming down to visit me tomorrow, and I'm going to create a documentary about all that. That's going to be my gift to the city. So irregardless of what the city's opinion may be of me, okay, I am doing legitimate work in the community, and I am effective in the community. I am able to go through all of these committees, all of these local historians that are a joke. April Haberstadt is a joke. She's a mockery. She mocks the history of San Jose, and I'm dispelling all of what it is that Clyde Arbuckle had done. Much of the damage that I am undoing now was done by Clyde Arbuckle. So I'm very, very proud of that accomplishment. And it was specifically noted that the council member for District 3 was absent from that meeting. They were asking why. Why was he absent? He was over here saying that he was for this, lifting the lowrider ban and everything. Why was it? I said I personally invited him, but he failed to attend that particular meeting. This is the building where the first issue of Lowrider was produced, and it's
Back to the committee.
Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.